we separate the malt sugars from the husk in our lauter tun, we pump that wort, it's called, that sweet wort, sweet malt sugar solution, over to our brew kettle. Purpose of putting that wort into the kettle is threefold. One is to sterilize it. Basically, on one level, what we're making here in the brewery is food, yeast media, really. If you think about it, from a microbiological point of view, what we're doing is making growth media. It has lots of amino acids, which are great for building blocks for building yeast cells. That comes from the proteins that are in malt. Malt has about 11-12% protein. It's got quite a bit of protein in it. So what we're doing is trying to sterilize this stuff by boiling it. We kill off any competition for our yeast. We want to make sure there's nothing growing in there except for our yeast.
Yes.
So that we produce very, very clean beer, nice tasting beer. The other reason why we boil it is to coagulate a lot of protein. Like I just mentioned, there's a lot of protein in barley malt. There's about 11-12% protein in barley malt. And maybe less than half of 1% of that winds up in the finished beer. Very, very low amount of protein. And how that manifests itself is that beer has a kind of thickness and creaminess and kind of a mouthfeel to it, which a lot of wines don't have. And it has foam on it. It actually has a foam head on beer. Is protein. That's the reason why it foams. And it'll foam because it's carbonated, and the bubbles will actually be surrounded by proteins as well as some other sort of carbohydrate gums, some sticky stuff that comes out of the malt, and they're held there. They actually form a shell and they sit there. Where champagne or ginger ale or other carbonated beverages will fizz up and then collapse, there's no structure to it. Right. Beer actually has protein in it, which will give that foam, the bubble structure, which will make foam.
Cool. So what is this we're standing in front of here, Joel?
This vessel here is the mash lauter tun. It's used for mashing our beer, and it's also used for separating the sugar from the mash once we're done.
I noticed touching this that it's warm. What's going on?
Yeah, it is warm. We've got a brew in there right now. We'll go up and take a look at it in a minute. But,
can we?
Absolutely. We've got a Pilsner that's mash that's in there right now, and it's just going through its conversion from starch to sugar. So we'll go up and take a look.
Let's do that.
What's happening in here right now is we've finished converting all of the starch to sugar, and now we're recirculating the liquid, the sweet wort. It's about 20% sugar, the liquid that's in here right now, and we're recirculating it through the grain bed in order to establish a filter bed. All the husk in the malt will actually form a filter bed. We'll recirculate it through that husk, through the false bottom in the lauter tun, and make it clear. Once it gets clear, then we run it over into the kettle, which is about to start happening now.
Oh, that smells great.
It smells really good.
Doesn't smell like beer.
No, it smells like really sweet malt sugar. It doesn't smell like anything else. It just makes you happy.
So are we about to start moving things into the kettle?
Yeah, we're just going to close this up right now, and we're going to start pumping the wort over into the kettle.
That is very clear.
Yeah, we're transferring the clarified wort from the lauter tun. We've recirculated these malt sugars to get them very, very, very clear. We use the natural malt husks to clarify it as a filter bed, and then we pump it over into the kettle. It'll be about 2 hours before we have the kettle full and we can add our hops and begin our boil.
Is there a reason why it's that slow?
Yeah, we have to run very slowly so we don't compact the grain bed. What we're doing here is running the wort, the sweet wort, through our grain bed right now and using it as a filter. If we run too quickly, we'll compact the grain bed and it'll stick. We have knives in our lauter tun. If you notice inside our lauter tun, there's a big metal arm with knives that stick down that can be turned and can cut the grain bed in case it does get stuck. That's the bane of the existence of a brew house operator, is a stuck mash bed.
Does that happen frequently?
It does happen frequently, and that's why lauter tuns are designed to be able to cope with it. So
nice
just
and slow.
Nice and slow. You got to go slow. Brewing is not about speed.
No. Is it just me, or does it smell slightly different in here?
Yeah.
It's a different smell than
a little bit different. It's been separated from the malt, so it doesn't have the huskiness that the mash has. It does actually taste cleaner and taste more kind of purely like the malt sugar. So that's a sample of it.
And is this what that tastes like in there?
That's exactly what that tastes like in there. That's about 20% sugar. That's sweet wort.
It's sweet.
It's extremely sweet. So
I don't know how much of this I could drink.
No, that's why. Well, it's about
lacking in alcohol somehow.
It's completely lacking in alcohol, but it's very, very, very sweet. That's the first run. That's the first stuff that comes out. That's going to get lighter and lighter and lighter as we run over into the kettle, because we're going to start rinsing the sugar in the lauter tun. We're going to start sparging or spraying water on top of the grain bed and rinsing that sugar through. So this is about 20% sugar. By the time we're done here today, what we'll have in the kettle will be around between 11 and 12% sugar. So it will get lighter and lighter and lighter as we rinse here. Okay, we're standing right in front of the kettle now, and what we add to the kettle are hops. So once we bring the wort up to boil, we will add hops to it, and it will boil for about 90 minutes with hops in it. Hops are used as a spice. Hops, a good analogy for hops are they're like tea leaves, is that they get added to the boil, they're boiled for 90 minutes, and then they're removed. They don't actually stay in the beer. All we do is extract the flavor and the bitterness from the hops, and then they're actually taken out during the kettle. So they originally were used as a preservative. They were been used for about 1,000 years, which is pretty recent in brewing history, and they were used as a preservative. They actually will suppress any other bacteria to a large degree that would live in malt wort, but yeast is kind of immune to them, and so yeast is favored and other stuff is suppressed. So they realized this about 1,000 years ago, that if you throw these hop flowers that grow on these vines that live in Central Europe into their beer, that it tasted really bitter. It would have been really sweet and sweet-sour back then, as it would have spoiled. And they used to flavor it with all sorts of things, because it would have been a sweet, sticky, souring liquid that you would drink very, very quickly. And it would only ever be maybe 2%, 3% alcohol maximum, because the main bacteria that spoils beer, one of them is acetobacillus, which actually converts alcohol into acetic acid. So
vinegar?
Vinegar. So that's how you make malt vinegar. That's how you make wine vinegar. You start out with alcohol, feed it to this bacteria, and it will produce vinegar out of it. So, say 1,200 years ago, 1,500 years ago, beer would have been brewed at home, and it would not have been flavored with hops, and it would be only brewed certain times of year, stuck outside. Wild yeast and all the other inherent microflora, bacteria, other yeasts, things that would land in it. It would start fermenting, and then you would basically drink it while it was fermenting. If you waited too long, there wouldn't be any alcohol in it, because the other bacteria that would live in it would consume the alcohol as well. So they would flavor it with anything that was growing, wild herbs and spices that they had in Central Europe. What happened then was that someone realized if you threw hops into it, all of a sudden made it taste really bitter. Before then, it would have been starting out really sweet, just like the wort you just tasted, and it would get progressively sour, and the alcohol content would go down. So if you were a feudal serf 1,200 years ago in Belgium, and coming home from your 15-hour day in the fields, and you just wanted to have a beer and forget about things, the problem is if your beer had gotten sour, you couldn't get any real alcoholic effect out of it. And so someone realized that if you threw hops into the stuff, they just by accident used them to flavor the beer got really bitter. But they realized that the alcohol content actually went up, because the yeast could outcompete the bacteria that was there, and the alcohol wasn't being converted to acetic acid. It would actually build up in the beer, and all of a sudden you could have this 3.5%, 4% alcohol, really strong beer. The use of hops actually allowed breweries to be centralized, because as a preservative, it allowed it to be brewed in one central location, put in barrels, and shipped around instead of just being brewed in people's houses, because it couldn't travel before. So hops are very, very important.
Speaking of relaxing at the end of the day, aren't hops from the cannabis family?
They are from the cannabis family. Cannabinaceae. There's only two members of that family. One is cannabis, and the other one is hops.
Interesting.
Hops are Humulus lupulus is the name of them. It's like a Wile E. Coyote name. But they are, you're right, they belong, there's no THC in hops, so you cannot smoke hops.